Okay, and now we'll start talking about judicial review. Now, obviously, I moved away from the mirror because it was kind of hard holding that thing up. So I'm back in my living room. This is a painting by Karen Marcus. Karen Marcus, friend of mine, called Merlot. We love this. It's in our living room, hanging up. So look for Karen Marcus on your... I don't know if she has stuff on the internet. I don't know. Anyways, let's continue on. One other thing I wanted to mention about the U.S. District Courts is that federal judges are nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate, a simple majority, as always, and they serve, they get a lifetime appointment. So they are in office until they're removed from office or until they quit. And the same is true for judges on the U.S. Court of Appeals. They wind up also, they also are appointed by the President, nominated by the President, approved by the Senate, and they serve for life. Serve for life makes it sound like a prison sentence. They have a lifetime appointment unless they're removed from office for some reason, or they resign. So I forgot that in the last video, so I want to make sure we covered that, although it's pretty self-explanatory in that case. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the power of judicial review. Now, this is really important because the power of judicial review is really the thing that makes the courts so powerful. So first, let's talk about what we mean by the power of judicial review. Judicial review is the power to go ahead and declare a law, a treaty, or an action by the government unconstitutional, to basically just wipe it out. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. First, notice on your notes it says Marbury versus Madison. That was the case where this was first done. This was the first time where the Supreme Court basically said, we're going to declare a law unconstitutional. Now, I want to be clear about this. You can read the Constitution all you want. You will not find anything in the Constitution that says that the Supreme Court, or any court for that matter, has the right to go ahead and just unilaterally decide this law is no good, it's unconstitutional. It's not in there. Judicial review is not listed. It's something that the courts took, the Supreme Court took in Marbury versus Madison, and it's basically been accepted since then. So, with that in mind, with that in mind, let me give you an example of judicial review. Back in 1989, there was a case called Texas versus Johnson. And this is these are the facts of that particular case. Texas had a law that made it illegal to go ahead and desecrate a flag. You could not desecrate a flag. In case you don't know what desecrate means, you can't destroy it, you can't treat it unless you do it properly. You can't mark on it, you can't stomp on it, you can't do anything that's going to go ahead and damage the flag. And you certainly can't burn it. You can't desecrate the flag that way. And so this guy Johnson was arrested at a protest at the Republican National Convention in 1988. And as part of his protest, what he decided to do was he was going to burn an American flag. So he was arrested. He was arrested in a Texas law, he was tried in a Texas court because he broke a Texas law. Well, he argued that his First Amendment rights protected the First Amendment protected his right to burn an American flag. He said, I have the right to free speech, and burning an American flag is my speech, my form of speech, and so that should be protected by the First Amendment. Well, that's an example of a case. That's an example of a case that went from the state courts up to the Supreme Court. Now, in that case, what the courts did is they ruled in favor of Mr. Johnson. What they said was, hold on. What they said was, the First Amendment protects freedom of speech, but it also protects freedom of symbolic speech. And burning a flag is a symbolic form of speech. It's a form of protest. And so they said that the law was unconstitutional, and what they did was they invalidated that law. But 47 other states also had laws that said you can't desecrate the flag. Well, when the Supreme Court went ahead and ruled that the Texas law was unconstitutional, it also at the same time effectively ruled that all laws that go ahead and make it illegal to burn flags are unconstitutional, and as a result, the laws in 48 states were gone just like that because of the Supreme Court ruling. That is the power of judicial review. Right? The power of judicial review is the ability to go ahead and declare a law, a treaty, or an action by government unconstitutional and just basically wipe it off the books. That's the power that the courts have. And again, you cannot find that power anywhere in the Constitution. That's something that the courts took themselves. Now, how does the Supreme Court go about and enforce its rulings? When they make a ruling, how do they go ahead and make sure that they can enforce it? What does the Constitution give them to enforce their decisions? And you see on number 1, you should write the answer in there. Nothing? Correct. Nothing. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives the courts the ability to enforce their own rulings. Right? They frequently need the president or a governor or somebody else to do the enforcing because they can't do the enforcing themselves. There's nowhere in the Constitution that gives them any power to enforce their rulings. Back when Andrew Jackson was president, so obviously this is like a long time ago, the courts made a ruling, I forgot what the case was, but it had to do with Indians in Georgia. And there was a dispute over something having to do with the Native Americans in Georgia. And so the courts ruled in favor of the Native Americans. And it was up to President Jackson to go ahead and enforce the ruling. And what Jackson said was, the Supreme Court has made its decision, let them go enforce it, which meant it couldn't be enforced because they don't have that mechanism. In 1952, the courts passed something called Brown versus the Board of Education. This was the first time that they said that schools had to be integrated, right? Well, the governor of Arkansas went up on the steps, I think it was in Little Rock, Arkansas. The governor of the state went in front of the high school that was supposed to be integrated and stood there and basically said, "Over my dead body." President Eisenhower, the president at the time, got the National Guard together and they went ahead and they made sure that everybody was integrated the way they were supposed to be. The court made the ruling, but it required the president to take action. And in this case, the action was taken by President Roosevelt. Okay, so that's it on this section of the courts. And next we're going to move on to checking the power of the courts, and that will be on Judiciary 04.